of course, there's a quote at the beginning, I think, from Balzac at the beginning of The Godfather, which is, "Behind every great fortune is a crime. Behind every great fortune is a crime."
Hello everyone. Today I have the honor and pleasure to talk to one of the most fearless and internationally prominent authors covering the Russian topic since many, many years, Luke Harding. Luke Harding has been working as a correspondent for The Guardian. In 2011, he was the very first international correspondent who has been denied entry to Russia. His numerous books have been translated into 30 languages and inspired even movies. Those books are Mafia State, WikiLeaks inside Julian Assange's War on Secrecy, The Snowden Files, The Definitive Story of the Murder of Litvinenko, Collusion, How Russia Helped Donald Trump to Win, Shadow State, Russia's remaking of the West, and his latest work is Invasion, Russia's bloody war against Ukraine's fight for survival. My name is Christoph Müller. I'm a German musician, cartoon artist, and I make videos for Ukraine here on YouTube. If you want to support my work, the best way to do so is to subscribe and give a like. And please hit the alarm bell to be informed about every new episode, and feel free to leave questions and comments down below. Welcome on Talk for Ukraine, Luke Harding.
Hi, Christoph. Very nice to be with you.
Thanks very much. Luke, I'm thinking about the personal danger a critical mind like you will be in when covering the truth about fascist and moral-free regime like the Putin regime and his henchmen. In your book, you show already in the beginning how it feels when your family and you are not safe, because they show that they can always break into your apartment, leaving special traces, and it can become even worse. So I want to ask you, how is it being a critical mind in a country like that when you are afraid about on your life?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of ways of answering that. I mean, one is to talk about my time in Moscow. Just to explain, I was the Guardian's bureau chief in Moscow from 2007 to 2011, where, as you said in your introduction, I was kicked out of the country. I was stopped at the airport flying in from London and told by a guy in an olive green uniform, "For you, Russia is closed. For you, Russia is closed." And my visa was sort of cancelled, and I was put in a cell, and then I was deported. But I mean, I think, when I was in Moscow, one of the things I understood, because I spent time there, I tried to investigate the murder of Alexander Litvinenko, as you mentioned, the Russian dissident who was poisoned in London in 2006 with radioactive tea.
Yeah.
And we had a series of break-ins at our family home, which in fact it turned out happened to American diplomats, British diplomats. I think at that point to German diplomats, not so much, because German-Russian relations were better.
Yeah.
Although subsequently they got bad. But what I understood was that there were sort of two rules that the Putin regime had back then. One was for dealing with Russians that they believed to be traitors, like Litvinenko, like you could say Alexei Navalny or Boris Nemtsov, both of whom were murdered. And that was that anything could happen to them, or nothing could happen to them. It was, but you could be executed by the state. Whereas the assumption with foreign journalists, particularly the Anglo-Saxons, was that we're all spies. That by day we wrote our stories for The Guardian. By night we got secret instructions from MI6 or the Foreign Office, or I don't know who.
Yeah.
And really it was mirror thinking, because in Soviet times, and in fact actually now, most of the correspondents working for Soviet state media were actually KGB.
Yeah.
So they and this is actually true about their thinking in general. They assume that the whole world is like Russia, but just a bit sort of shinier, and more hypocritical. So German politicians are all corrupt. They say one thing and do another, and so British politicians the same, and so on. So I sort of thought they were never going to kill me. But when they did put me in the cell, cancel my visa, I was surprised. Because
have you been in a cell, really?
Yeah, briefly. I mean, for about 45 minutes. And then I was put back on the same plane I'd arrived on.
Okay.
And a little lady, rather a nice lady, came, wheeling a trolley with my luggage, So but the point is that Russia hasn't cared about its international reputation for a very long time.
Yeah.
So we didn't really care when I was there 15 years ago, and obviously now, after the full scale invasion of Ukraine, it cares even less. But the other thing I wanted to say was that I don't think what I do is in any way kind of heroic. My job is basically just to tell the truth and to describe what's happening both in Ukraine or with Russia or with Europe or with the collapse of the world order, etc. I think that the heroes of this story, which I've been talking to you from Kiev, are Ukrainians, because it's Ukrainians who, from 2014, but certainly since 2022, since big invasion, have been fighting not just for themselves and for the survival of their state, but fighting for Europe.
Absolutely.
Actually, and what Zelensky says, what everybody says here, is that if Putin's not stopped in Ukraine, he'll keep going. And I don't think that's hyperbole. I think that's absolutely right. I mean, Putin has a plan. It's a neo-colonial, neo-imperial plan to make Russia great again, to restore the Russian Imperium.
You say,
and they even talk about taking back East Germany. I don't think they want all of it. They just want the bit they used to control. So the Ukrainians are holding the line, and therefore they're the heroes of the story.
Absolutely, they are, and the naivety of the Western countries is striking. Especially, I can tell you, as a German living in Germany and watching all of those horrible things that already happened in 2014, and that was actually the first time when I heard your name. I thought it was Boris Reitschuster. Do you know the journalist Boris Reitschuster?
Well, I do. Boris Reitschuster is a kind of German Luke Harding, basically.
He used to be a kind of a German Luke Harding. Nowadays, he disappeared somehow from the screen. And
back in the day, he was very good on kind of Russian disinformation, and also how Russia was trying to kind of manipulate German politics in the same way it tries to manipulate all European politics, including British politics, for that matter. But I sort of think, I think it's a kind of interesting kind of conversation about how when countries work up to what Russia is. In other words, not just an internally repressive, nasty country that beats up its dissidents and chucks people into prison cells, but one that is aggressive, violent, revisionist, that wants to change international borders and use war as a kind of instrument in the way that we haven't really seen for 80 years, not on this scale. And the Brits sometimes point the fingers at the Germans and say, you Germans, you became addicted to Russian oil. You thought you could trade with Russia, and that would Handel durch Wandel or Wandel durch Handel. That would kind of change things. And you were just crazy, naive, and greedy. And to some extent, that you could make that case. But also in my country, in the UK, we became addicted to Russian money.
Absolutely.
We sold the Russians our football clubs, our newspapers, our palaces. We let oligarch Russian kids go to our private schools.
Yeah. Londongrad.
That was fine, until London became Londongrad. Also not realizing that there was a full-blown attempt to subvert our politics too, and to push the hard right and the far left, and to break the kind of moderate center, actually. And so I think we've all been naive. I mean, I think perhaps the only difference is that most Brits, after Litvinenko's murder in 2006, you remember the image of a dying Litvinenko with no hair and a hospital gown with those sort of pale blue eyes staring at you. They realized that the Russia of the KGB, the Russia of death squads, of assassination, of theatrical murder was back. Yeah. And I think it took Germany a little longer to realize that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Germany has completely realized it. There's so many people also in Germany who are completely still naive, and they really fall into the trap of Russian propaganda and believe that NATO has always expanded and that the Russians have always been lied on. And this is difficult. And we also have a lot of politicians in our parliaments who seem to be naive or play the naive. and even completely pro-Russian parties like the AfD or the Wagenknecht party. This is for me really disgusting. Also, about 2014, it was Angela Merkel from the CDU, the very well estimated German chancellor, Angela Merkel, who agreed to start with Nord Stream 2 with this pipeline. This, for me, this was not so.
Yeah, I think you know, I mean, I think you, I look, I'm on the kind of from the progressive end of politics, and not a natural Merkel fan, but there's a lot you can admire about Merkel. But I do think her biggest mistake, and perhaps one of the biggest mistakes in German politics in the post-war era, was to make the German economy reliant on Russia, because as if, you know, Russia was the Russia of, I don't know, 2000 or 2001 or early Putin, whereas actually, particularly by Nord Stream 2, I mean, Russia was this nasty, repressive, totalitarian country that was doing sabotage everywhere, that was sending assassins all over the place, that blew up MH17, killing nearly 300 people over eastern Ukraine, that annexed Crimea, that was sort of behaving really like the Germany of the late 1930s.
This there are two good keywords you deliver now, 1930s and MH17, and your book Mafia State. I've got it here. This is a really a very interesting book, and Mafia State. There is a quote that I don't know who said that. Maybe Garry Kasparov said, every state has its own mafia, but Russia, it's the other way around. The mafia has its own state.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. And in my book, I acknowledge Kasparov as well. Also, kind of the Godfather, Mario Puzo. I mean, Kasparov read Mario Puzo. I also read the Godfather, and of course, there's a quote at the beginning, I think, from Balzac at the beginning of the Godfather, which is, behind every great fortune is a crime. Behind every great fortune is a crime. And of course, the people at the Russian state, they all have great fortunes. They're all multi-billionaires. And what was interesting is, I think when I was there for the Guardian, there were sort of two projects going on. One was the kind of imperial project, and I reported in 2008 on the Russian invasion of Georgia, for example, which was a sort of dress rehearsal for Crimea and 2022 in Ukraine. And then there was the project of personal enrichment, the sort of kleptocracy. And back then, the second project, the stealing money project, was bigger. And I think what we've sort of moved into a phase of late Putin, where Putin is in this messianic space where he's decided that only he can do this great task of redeeming Ukraine, you know, uniting historical Russia, in other words, Belarus, Ukraine, into this great spiritual, cultural, language entity, and that no one else can do it. So he's an old man in a hurry. He's basically a psychopath in a hurry, and that makes him extremely dangerous. As I was saying, not just for Ukraine, but for Germany too, and for Western Europe.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's why I am shocked about the naivety of those of our politicians, of the Western politicians who think they can make deals with people like Putin and his cronies, who are actually nothing else than mafia crooks, and ordinary people would never do deals with a mafia man. And other if you are bribed, or if you are corrupted, or if you are menaced, but an ordinary person would not do this. So this is for me just still a riddle. How can people be so naive?
Yeah, also the Russian political elite, you know, Putin and the people around him, they laugh at the naivety of the Europeans.
Yeah.
Because they'll lie to the Germans, they'll lie to Berlin, they'll lie to Paris, they'll lie to London. And they enjoy our discomfort because we sort of think, well, maybe they're serious, maybe they really mean it this time. And of course, lying is something that Putin learned at KGB school. It's a way of it's an expression of contempt, but it's also an expression of power. Mm-hmm. And the point is, quite often when they lie really badly. They don't even clever lie; they stupid lie.
Piss off! Fucker off! Oh, shit! My legs are grey, my ears are gnarled, my eyes are old and bent.
Quiet! Silly person. Guards, search the house! You know the penalty?
Because you know, if you were to define the governing idea of the contemporary Russian state, I mean, sure, there's imperialism there, but I would say it's fuck you. It's kind of fuck you. It's kind of fuck youistic. It's fuck youism. And
Oh, sir, couldn't find anything, sir.
they lie because fuck you. I mean, you stupid Germans are going to believe it. Well, fuck you, and we're just going to lie. And we're going to snigger. And this was the problem even in 2022. I mean, I was in Kiev in the run-up to the full-scale invasion, and you know, Macron was flying to Moscow, trying to engage Putin in dialogue. You know, can we find a reasonable solution? Can we go to... Putin's not interested in a mutual solution. He just wants to punch your face. He just wants to smack your face. And I wish Macron had called me. I mean, I could have explained. I could have explained that there's no accommodation, that basically we're in a world where, well, I think everyone understands now, we just have to rearm, we have to industrialize, we have to make weapons. Unfortunately, we have to learn how to shoot. We have to be prepared to slightly abandon our cozy life because you know, winter is coming.
Winter is coming, as Karos Kasparov wrote, and his book is also highly recommendable.
Yeah, it's a good book. He was right. Yeah,
and you know, 22. When the war came, the big full-scale invasion came in February 22, then I thought, okay, the only good thing about this, if there is any good thing, the only good thing about this is that we, the Western country, now can really clearly see who is Russia, what are they doing. But even now, 3.5 years later, we haven't got it. We still stay in our rabbit holes or wherever and try to hide our faces in the sand like a strauss. How is it called, this bird? The big one.
Ostrich.
The ostrich.
Yeah. I mean, I think denial is okay. What really irritates me, and it's interesting, I think this is more of a German phenomenon than a British phenomenon, is, you know, in the UK, we don't really have Die Linke or AfD. I mean, we don't have openly pro-Putin parties. We have this idiot called Nigel Farage, who's kind of and his Reform Party. He's kind of pro-Putin, but he knows that this is not a vote winner. So he's quite kind of quiet about it. No one actually wants to vote for Putin in the UK. Whereas in Germany, it seems, you know, this is an electoral strategy for some parties to be pro-Putin. But the people on the far right, I understand. I don't like it. But what really aggrieves me are German intellectuals who sign petitions saying we shouldn't give Ukraine weapons because we want peace. Well, if you don't give Ukraine weapons, then Russians will come and they will murder people like they did in Bucha and Mariupol. They will rape women. They will enslave people. They will torture them. They will take them off to dungeons where they will electroshock them and starve them and brutalize them. And that's what pacifism means. And what I find is really weird is that, you know, Germany did fascism. And in a way, I sort of think Germany has a special obligation to be vigilant about fascism elsewhere and to stand up against it. And what we're talking about is, as you said in your introduction, we're talking about Russian fascism. This is the closest approximation to the 1930s on the European continent that we've seen. And therefore, we have to fight fascism. And if you're on the left, and if you're a pacifist, I'm afraid, you know, it's not a moment for pacifism. It's a moment for fighting fascism.
This 100% agree. This is exactly as I feel. We have a special obligation as Germans because we have had Adolf Hitler and his propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, who really perfectionated those days the propaganda, and the Russians learned so much. I read even that when annexing Crimea in 2014, Putin has obviously really transcribed everything that Adolf Hitler has written those days when he annexed Sudetenland. That was the same thing, and we forgot everything. We forgot
everything. I mean, there are lots of parallels. The whole kind of idea of, what does becoming, what does being a member of a country mean? I mean, does it mean kind of language, right, or ethnicity, or does it actually mean just a sort of sense of civic belonging? And the kind of modern, 20th, late 20th, 21st century idea is civic belonging. If you live in a country, you pay your taxes, etc., you become a member of that country, and it doesn't matter whether you're green or blue or orange. That is your identity. Whereas the kind of Herder idea, the Hitler idea, the Putin idea is, no, it's all blood and soil. If you speak Russian, you are my, part of my dominion. And of course, Ukrainians are bilingual. They speak Russian, they speak Ukrainian. A lot of them speak English these days. And it's interchangeable. I hear Russian on the streets of Kiev. I hear Ukrainian on the streets of Kiev. I hear conversations which are half and half.
Yes, yes.
There's no one here wanting to be saved by Russia because they are Russian speakers. This is an entirely external idea,
of course,
that's being used by Russian propaganda. And what Russia's actually doing is killing Russian speakers by dropping drones, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, mortars, shells, bombs, etc.
Yes, we should really listen not so much to the things what Putin and his cronies they say, or his propagandists. We should look at the actions. But we do this. We look at the actions, but we still don't act or react. We even don't react, but at least we don't act. I just mentioned Taurus missiles. We Germans seem to have some really good missiles which still have not been delivered. And
Christoph, I'm looking out my window in Kiev to see if I can see them coming down the street. It's been a long wait. I mean, I tell you what, if Germany were to deliver them, people would be standing on the streets waving German flags.
Absolutely,
it would make them make Germany incredibly popular.
Yes, and
Yeah,
Friedrich Merz. Friedrich Merz kind of won also the election because he said very clearly before being elected that he would deliver Taurus missiles. And nowadays he changed mind somehow. I don't know why. He is still acting very good, but on about this Taurus thing, it seems to be poisoned or very hot or something. They don't want to touch it, and it's because of our German population, which, as you know, we have been a divided country, and East Germany has been under Russian occupation, also full of Russian propaganda, and that's why. Because of these, but it's not only East Germans, it's also West Germans who have been full of Russian propaganda, and they believe all these stupid things. So, let me ask you another question. You know the Russians very well, since the Russian population, the ordinary population also, and you have been inside Russia until 2011, and then you left the country. But you are still in contact with Russians, aren't you?
I'm not. Actually, I was up until 2022. And then my last Russian friends,
What happened?
I'm in touch with many Russians who fled the country, all over the place. The Russian opposition in exile, I know, and writers, journalists, poets. But inside Moscow, it became impossible to talk to them after 2022 because even quite clever people I knew, intelligent people, basically bought the propaganda from the regime that they would talk about the suffering of the people of the Donbass, that the Ukrainians were Nazis, that they were cruel. And, I had the last conversation I had with someone I know very well is, she said, why don't you go and try and talk to the Russian soldiers? And I said, well, because they kill people, they shoot journalists, they fire up cars, they rape women, they torture, they leave bodies in the streets. And she just couldn't process this. She didn't want to believe it. She just thought this was... Whereas, of course, that's exactly what happened. I mean, I was in Bucha in April 2022, a few days after the Russians left. And the things I saw there, I wish I hadn't seen.
Oh, man. Yes, that's the thing I never can get into my head. There are pictures and there are stories from people who have seen it with their proper eyes, but they still don't believe it. They
still don't believe it. They think it's basically. It's funny when you have those conversations. There are sort of two things. One is your side is no better, that basically the West is to blame. And then if you can then say, well, look, actually, that's not quite right, it's a vina. I heard it. Well, it's war. What do you expect? It's war. Well, as if the war had come from the cosmos, rather than actually one guy in Moscow deciding to make a big war. But the other thing is this sort of passivity, this fatalism, which is, well, it's a shrug. What can we do? We're just small people. What can we do? There's nothing we can do. So first, first defiance, then fatalism, passivity, kind of acceptance that ordinary people can't kind of change the situation. And unfortunately, most Russians are in that space. Either they really support, or they say they don't kind of really support. But what can we do?
Mm-hmm. What is your impression? Do they really believe it, or do they pretend to believe it? Or how big is the percentage of those who really believe it? Have you some feeling there? Because
I mean, first of all, you can't do reliable sociological research in Russia because you call a number and you say, "Do you support Mr. Putin?"
Yeah.
I mean, no one in their right mind is going to say, "No, I don't. I hate the guy." I mean,
but will you never?
But I mean, my sense is the majority support, and that's very definitely the Ukrainian view. I mean, there's a kind of there is a view that it's just bad Putin and the bad people around him, and most Russians are okay. But we've had more than 1 million Russian killed and wounded fighting in Ukraine for money. These are ordinary Russians, and they come to Ukraine to kill Ukrainians. So the Ukrainian view is actually they're all guilty. Particularly the liberals. Ukrainians really hate the liberals because they sort of think that these are people with, education, with intellectual and cultural capacity, and they should have tried harder to stop the Putin, specter.
Yeah. Well, may I just ask you, are you really living now in Kyiv? This is your apartment there in Kyiv, where I see you now.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's a sort of service department, so it's not just mine. But I come and go, so I'll do a reporting stint here for the Guardian, and I'll do stories. I'll go to the front line. I'll talk to a lot of people. I'll fill notepads up, and then I go back and I'm back in the UK, and then I'm back here again. So I've been, I guess you can call it commuting, but I've been in Ukraine pretty regularly for 3.5 years, more than 3.5 years.
Yeah, very good.
Since 2021, because finally, so you mentioned my book Invasion.
Yes.
At the beginning, I was writing it in a kind of fugue state in 2022 because for me, writing this book was catharsis. I'd seen so many bad things. I'd been to Mariupol just for the full-scale invasion. I was in Bucha. I'd been on the front line. So I was writing this book, and I said to my wife, I said, I'm going to call it Invasion. She said, don't call it Invasion. Call it I fucking told you so.
Okay. But you didn't call you
didn't
name it like that.
Told you so. But in a way, I fucking told you so.
Then that's the true title, of course. Yeah. I was asking that because we hear about the increasing numbers of attacks every night, and now it has been 700 something drones last night or what in Kyiv. It must be horrible, isn't it? You hear the explosions everywhere, don't you?
It's definitely got worse. I mean, I think for two reasons. One is military and technical. The Russians are just producing more drones. They've built more factories. They've expanded. They've indigenized production. They were getting them from Iran. Now they're building them themselves. The other is geopolitics, is that Trump is back in the White House. He's pivoted towards Moscow. And I think Putin is confident that really whatever he does, there won't be a large or an especially meaningful response from Trump. And I know Trump has supposedly been cooling on Putin recently, but the fact is when he came into power, he could have flooded Ukraine with weapons.
Yes.
He could have said, look, Biden was too weak, old, confused to do what had to be done. I believe in American strength, American power. We're going to help Ukraine win. And we're going to sanction the hell out of Russia. And he didn't do any of that stuff. Instead, he called Zelensky a dictator, chewed him out in the Oval Office, praised Putin, etc. So I think that has emboldened the Russians. And just in terms of what it's like, you just don't sleep. Everyone here is exhausted. You're trying to go to bed, and then about midnight, there's an air alert. And then these days, everyone is going to shelter or basement or bathroom, putting their kids in bathtubs. That's quite popular.
Yeah.
because you hear the drones in a way you didn't used to. You hear them flying above the center of Kiev. They sound like terrible mopeds. You can hear the engine in the sky. Then you hear machine gun fires. The Ukrainians try and shoot them down. Explosions. It's crazy loud. Sometimes your windows vibrate.
Oh, man.
And I did a story about this yesterday for The Guardian. I talked to a mum who went down to the shelter with her 7-month-old baby and her 9-year-old daughter, 2 girls. Her husband is a soldier. And I just felt sorry for her because she was sad. And she was exhausted. She was wrung out. She was numb. She was taking painkillers, making coffee. And the thing is, we used to, on the news, we used to kind of flamboyant bad stuff. An earthquake, a hurricane, a flood, etc. It's all big, dramatic. It's all Wagner. And actually, the tragedy here is not Wagner. It's 1,000 tiny notes. Just a little note on a piano. It's small stuff. It's the fact that people are exhausted, that kids are fretful, they're not happy, and they can't explain why, or they're aggressive, or your brother gets stomach pains, or your female friend is drinking too much every night. People doing all sorts of coping mechanisms, and that's the problem. This is basically what we're seeing is terrorism on an absolutely epic scale from Russia, to try and demoralize people, so they go, fuck it, let's just have Russian flag. We don't care. Just make it stop. Put Russian flag up. We don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not going to work because Putin still doesn't understand Ukrainians. But that is the strategy.
Yeah, and that's the tragedy from inside the Ukraine, but the tragedy from outside, from our country here, Germany, and the Western world, is that we don't give Ukraine the support we could give, even without fighting. The Ukrainians do the fighting for us, for themselves, but also for us. They prevent us from being invaded by Russians, or that our government. But that is what I'm really angry about.
I think Germany's been doing pretty well. I mean, I think you're the main contributor of military and financial aid. So I don't think Germans can feel too bad. I think it's more a question of leadership.
Yeah,
and leadership, and also making the case to the domestic population again and again and again that this is essential. It's not an option. It's not an option. It's necessary. That it's existential for Germany, and that Germany has a special burden, a special moral obligation in the situation. And you sort of see more and more. It seems to be Macron and Starmer. I mean, Merz is kind of at the table for sure, but you sort of think that Germany really has to be up there trying to shape. At a time when America is exiting, is leaving the stage, it's got to be the Europeans, and I'm including the UK in that, who are becoming Ukraine's best allies and best champions. And it's got to be, of course, it's rhetorical, but it's also just got to be. We've got to make stuff. And hey, Germany's good at industry, right? Making stuff, delivering stuff, and also being as quick as possible in the situation.
After 3.5 years, you say being quick. Yeah, you're really right. And I see the NATO, which has been invented 75 years ago to prevent Russia from invading us or from attacking us. So the NATO has been created, and the United States have been leading the NATO and financing, and so having the most weapons. The NATO is still a powerful organization. I've been talking to Stephanie Barbs recently. But when I see nowadays America is dropped out of the race because of Donald Trump. So NATO seems to be all of a sudden a toothless tiger without teeth. And so, but when I watch Ukraine, I see Ukraine is doing the job of NATO, preventing Russia from invading and fighting against Russia and proving that Russia can be beaten, because there are so many people.
I think NATO should be applying to join Ukraine. Basically, that's what should be, because, and I say that only half jokingly, because the Ukrainian army is basically the best in the world.
Absolutely.
I mean, look at what they're doing with drones. It's the biggest producer of drones. They are the most innovative, clever engineers. They're now developing their own interceptors to shoot down these Shahed missiles. I mean, you would want to get 20 drone guys to teach a course at your staff college, so you can then develop your own kind of, unmanned command system, because the whole nature of war has changed. Forget about what you see on Netflix. This is a war of the sky. This is a war of technology, of competition, of industrial resources. And any future war will be a drone war. So no point in having aircraft carrier, no point in having, expensive kit. You need to recruit, give a job offer to Germany's top 200 gamers, a bunch of, overweight 22-year-olds drinking sodas on the sofa, but who are very, very good at gaming. These are the people you want to hire. You want them to fly drones, and you want to recruit them into the Bundeswehr.
Yeah.
That is my idea for you.
That is really great. And when I heard that also NATO should join Ukraine, but I think they would not do it because they think they are so big, and the mindset of the NATO countries is still not the thing which is needed now. But really, there should be an organization. Yeah, how can we do it? But we have to do it quickly. Because otherwise, if Ukraine will be left alone all the time as it has been, it's left alone is a strong word, but from my feeling, it will leave Ukraine alone. And so if this carries on for a longer while, then probably Ukraine will lose a lot of their population by migration. They cannot stand it any longer, and then somehow Putin will have won, and we provoke also China that they also would attack Taiwan, and Russia will carry on with NATO countries, and this is not a good situation. So it's for
no,
me.
But I don't think we should. Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't be too doomy about it. I mean, Ukrainians are fighting on bravely. I mean, that in the east it's complicated. Yes, Russians are going forward, but they're going forward quite slowly. And also they're destroying everything. I mean, you can't live in the places where Russia has been. It's just kind of rubble. There's nothing.
Yes.
There's no electricity, no gas, no shops, no life, no roads, no future. It's desert. They've desertified, parts of Ukraine. But Ukraine is a big country. It's a resilient country, and people are fighting on because they've got no choice. But we shouldn't sort of accept the as Donald Trump has, the kind of Russian narrative that Ukraine can only lose, because what Trump has always done with Putin is to over kind of rate Russia and Russian capacity and underrate Ukrainian capacity. I mean, there was the exchange in the Oval Office where, Trump said, "Look, if it wasn't for America, you'd have been finished in a week," and Zelensky says, "I had it from Putin himself 3 days." 3 days.
Yeah.
That's what the Russians thought they would take Kiev in 3 days. Yeah. And more than 3 years later, they still are a long, long way from that goal.
And that's why the last one should understand nowadays that Ukraine really can win, but we have to better support them. And I think that one day we'll also have to fight ourselves because Russia will attack NATO countries otherwise. The Lithuanian countries.
Well, they're definitely, yeah. I mean, if they could get Odessa, which they can't for now, but let's say they get Odessa, then they will definitely then go to Transnistria, and then they will try and topple Moldova either through kind of soft coup or hard coup. Yeah. So Moldova is gone, and I think they want to do the Baltics. They certainly want to kind of create a land corridor to Kaliningrad. That's a big strategic priority. There'll definitely be a war plan in the Kremlin somewhere for that. Meanwhile, they hate Poland, and I think they think. I don't know if they would try and invade Germany, but I think they can basically invade your politics and invade your minds.
That's the point.
They've already successfully invaded a lot of East German minds and recolonized you that way. So it's a war. Russia is at war with Europe and with Germany, and Germany may not wish this to be true. But we have to recognize this, and once you recognize this, then you have a kind of strategic clarity about what you need to do by way of response.
Yeah. So hopefully talks like ours here can contribute to the mindset of our populations and politicians also, that we can understand that we want to keep our democracy, our freedom of speech, freedom of travel, and freedom of everything, of negotiation. So otherwise we would live under dictatorship, excuse me.
Ja, Christoph, ich wollte auch sagen, ich bin quasi Deutscher. Also ich bin nicht ganz Deutscher, aber ich war 4 Jahre in Berlin als deutscher Korrespondent.
You speak so good German? Wow, I didn't know that.
Deswegen kann ich auch Deutsch. Aber ich
Fantastic.
dachte, das war besser auf Englisch zu machen.
So Luke, you know what?
Dann haben wir ein großes Publikum.
Fantastic. Look, if I may ask you, I'm not sure if you have ever time, but können wir irgendwann ein Interview nochmal auf Deutsch machen, sodass wir noch mehr deutsche Menschen haben?
Ja, das können wir machen, aber vielleicht nächstes Mal. Also jetzt klappt das nicht, weil ich habe keine Zeit. Aber
Wahnsinn.
Aber es läuft wesentlich besser auf Englisch. Aber wenn Sie auf Deutsch
du kannst
machen wollen, dann können wir das machen. Ja. Christoph, I must run, but it's very nice to see you and your audience.
Yeah, it was really great to talk to you. Thank you so much, Luke. Thank you very much for having your time and your insights and your personality. It was great meeting you. Hopefully another time, be blessed and be protected. That I say to all Ukrainians, and have a good life.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Christoph. Okay, cheers. Good
Thanks.
to see you.
Cheers, Luke. Okay, bye.
Bye. Cheers.